In the stillness of night, the Lord is there. It all started at the age of 19 when author, speaker, singer, life coach, educator, and model Jill Chambers married her husband, Danny, and traveled the world with their music ministry, Carry the Call. A founding pastor for 22 years, she invested in the lives of thousands of people globally, training them in leadership skills. Today, God is leading her down a new path. After being married for 30 years to her husband, Danny, the Lord called him home, and now she is called to carry the call without her love. This is her story. This is today's Nashville. This is faith. Sweet Jill, my husband and I, Ted, have been praying for you for almost a year and a half. And I am so blessed and honored that you would invite me into your home to share your faith and what God has brought you through. But before we get there, I want to know about your life with Danny, where it started, and just your love story and your faith. It's an amazing story and journey that he has brought you through and where he's taking you.
Well, 32 years ago, I married my happily ever after. I was 19, I was very young, and he had 2 children from a previous marriage, so it was a blended family.
How did you meet him?
So we met at church. He was leading worship and teaching and preaching, and we started courting and dating, and our situation was unique. And so how we dated was he would come to my parents' house where I was living, and we would date together and he would bring his kids with him. And my mom was she was very adamant about, this will be your life. Mm-hmm. So we're not going to let you drop the kids off and go out to eat. We're going to all date together. This family is going to be one unit. It's going to be, it's one thing. So we want you to be very aware of the decisions that you're making and be very aware.
Did it scare you that you were going to be an instant mom at age 19?
Absolutely. It was very scary. I sorted laundry. Right after we got married, I sorted laundry and I cried because it was like, I'm never getting out of the laundry room. There was so many clothes.
How old were the kids?
They were 8 and 11 when we got married. And so, and he had full custody of the kids. So I always told everyone I was adopted because, they were together before we were together. But we fell in love, and God allowed us to travel the world and do ministry and worship. We were able to bring worship into churches. There was a season where Danny was a youth pastor, and there was no music for the students. He had done this backward masking thing where you burn your rock and roll, right? And but then the man that hosted the backward masking thing, he actually gave Danny Integrity Hosanna number 7, which was Don Moen. And he listened to the cassette tape, that's how old it was, in the car, and he felt something that was really different in the music. And he just put his hands up in the car and said, Lord, I don't know what this is, but I want it. And within the next few weeks, he started leading worship in the youth group, and it grew from like 50 students to over 700.
Where were you? Were you here in
Oklahoma City?
Oklahoma City.
And so we had the largest youth group in the Midwest, and it was based on the worship. It was a very, very, that was a very divine intersection in our lives. And that then opened doors for us to go into churches and bring that sound, because it was a very different sound. It was very contemporary. It was something that young people, students, wanted to be a part of. And if you think back in the 80s, 90s, the worship music was older. It wasn't anything that felt relevant to students. And so he brought that into churches, which then allowed us to travel and do recordings. And then eventually God began to speak to us about moving out of Oklahoma City to here to Nashville. And in 1997, we moved to Nashville. We started a church. And it was a great blessing in our life. We attracted a lot of the musicians because Nashville has musicians at every corner. But we were able to also speak into their lives as traveling, units, because my husband traveled so much, and throughout our lives he was on the road. Sometimes I was with him, sometimes I wasn't. So it gave us a unique voice to those traveling musicians, those in, if they were AV, all the people that had to tour. We were able to speak to them a little differently about how they can maintain their life.
Were you singing also?
I was singing with him. I was singing background with him. He had me on the stage all the time. He had me speaking at the church.
How was that?
It was really different.
Yeah, you mentioned briefly that he's a one-take.
Oh, he's one-take Jake. So Danny would get up, sing a song. He would be in a studio, laying down a vocal track. We'd do a video segment, one-take Jake. And then there's me, like do over, wait, do over. But he taught me how to be confident, and he really gave me a place. And there were several times, Terry, where I would get up to speak at our church, and men would get up and leave. And I thought they were just like going to the restroom together like we chicks do, but no, they were taught that women were not allowed to speak in church. And so here, being in Nashville, Danny didn't realize it, but I was a catalyst for women speakers in this city, and I didn't even know it. He just kind of put me on the platform. So it kind of paved the way for some.
Did you know about that when you?
I didn't understand it at first until I actually got a letter from someone who said, women are not allowed to speak in the church. And
how did you react to that?
I just kind of looked at Danny like, am I not supposed to do this? He goes, no, you're doing what I asked you to do. This is how you're completing me. You're my wife. You're my helpmate. And so this is how you're helping me. And so, yeah. I just kept on speaking, and if men would get up and leave, I just kind of look at them and smile and be like, well, bye. Because in my heart I thought, well, who taught you your ABCs? Who taught you how to add and subtract? Probably a woman, let's just be real. And so I had to change my paradigm and not see it as rejection, but just really just walk in my shoes and walk through the doors that were open, and I saw it as me helping my husband, not as me competing with him, but completing him.
Tell me about Carry the Call.
Carry the Call was our very first live recording with Integrity Hosanna, and they came to the church. So we had gone to the table several times with Integrity. We wrote several songs. I co-authored some songs for Integrity Hosanna, and they wanted to feature Danny as an artist, but he was too contemporary, and he wasn't a pastor yet. So as soon as we started the church, they were able to say, oh, you're a pastor, let's do a recording. So in 1997, literally weeks after we started our church, we did our first recording, which was Carry the Call.
So pastor, music artist, traveling. How did you handle that? And you were having children too, weren't you?
Yes, we call them our tribe of five. So we had the two, and then we had three together, and it's really a balancing act. It was recognizing each season is different, and preparing for each season, no different than, here in Nashville, we get a lot of snow, get a lot of weather, so you just kind of prepare differently for that moment in that season. So in certain seasons of my children's lives, I knew I had to stay home. I had to be there for them. They were priority. They were always a priority, but there would be times when, as they got a little bit older, that I knew that I could travel because they were okay. And then there were times when I knew I had to stay home.
And you also, at that time, were you going to school with getting your degree, and you were like leading people in your church too about leadership skills and.
I didn't actually go to a university, but I went through several training courses, one of which was behavioral science, which introduced me to the personality styles and the DISC, and it taught me how people behave, because our decisions and our actions are based on that creates our behavior, but it's how we think and how we're wired. So I never really went to a university, but I did take a lot of training courses on especially the behavioral science, which is how people are wired, and that empowered me to assimilate people, especially in our church. If they were, extroverted, then I would put them as a greeter because they loved people. If they were introverted, I would put them, counting data or entering data because they were pretty much precise on not wanting to make a mistake and misspell something or mistype something. And so it helped me learn where to place people within the organization, because you have a lot of people that want to volunteer, but if you don't put the people in the right place, then they always feel like they're doing it wrong.
And I think it's interesting too, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but I want to talk about the day that your life changed.